Hey guys, I'm back from training up and I have a lot of really interesting stories to share with you. I've got enough that I'm going to break them up into 2 parts, this being the first. I love to put them all into one entry, but I just haven't had the chance to write them all down yet. Nothing too crazy happened to me personally while I was out there, but we did have one incident with a rookie that I found pretty relevant. Since I'm sure you guys have been waiting for these, I just will get right into it, right into these stories. I'll assign each batch of stories to the person who told me them. KD. KD is a veteran SAR officer who's been in the field for about 15 years. She specializes in high elevation mountain rescues and is widely considered as one of the best in her field. She was one of the more enthusiastic storytellers, and since we were together quite a bit during experiences and exercises, she ended up just telling me 4 stories that really stuck with me. The first story came when I asked her some of her most traumatic calls. She took her head and then said that really bad calls happen more frequent on the mountain since the potential for nasty accidents is much higher. About 5 years ago, one of the parks she worked in had a string of disappearances. It was a bad year, one of the worst on record in terms of weather. They were getting about a foot of new snow every couple of days and several avalanches killing climbers that season. Despite warnings to stay on the mapped trails, there were always people who think that they know better. In one particular tragic case, an entire family was wiped out because the father ignored the warnings and led them into an unsafe area. They were snowshoeing, and as best as Katie could figure, they walked onto the snow shelf and it looked solid according to them, but it wasn't. It gave way, and the family tumbled nearly 300 feet down a slope, landing on the rocks below. The parents died instantly, along with one of the children. The other 2 survived, one with a broken leg and fractured ribs. The other almost completely unharmed except for bruises and a sprained ankle. The uninjured child left his sibling behind to find help. Katie said that he didn't make it more than half of a mile before the storm overtook him. He likely stopped to rest or tried to warm himself up. He ended up freezing to death. Search teams eventually located the family thanks to witnesses who had seen them heading into that direction into the wilderness. Katie was the one who ended up finding the boy who was frozen to death. She described it in very painful detail. It had started snowing just enough to limit long-distance visibility, but not enough to make searching impossible. She saw a figure sitting in the snow ahead of her and rushed over. The boy was sitting upright, knees tucked into his chest, arms wrapped around them, his head buried in his coat. When she moved the coat to see his face, she saw he was crying. His face was twisted in terror, with frozen tears streaked down his cheeks. She said that it was painfully obvious he'd been terrified when hypothermia claimed him. As a mother, it broke her heart. She told me repeatedly that she hopes that the father is going to burn in hell. The disemboweled climber. The second story was from when KD was a rookie. Her team received a report of experienced climbers who hadn't returned home from the previous day. His wife was convinced something bad had happened because he had never failed to come home on time. They set out to search, climbing some of the very technically challenged parts of the mountain. When they reached to the relatively flat area, Katie noticed blood in the snow. She followed the trail, which gradually included small bits of tissue. The farther she followed it, the more there was, until finally she came to a sheltered area under a cliff face and found the climber. There was more blood than she'd ever seen. He was lying face down, one arm stretched forward as if he'd tried to crawl and then ended up dying. Upon closer inspection, she realized he'd been partially disemboweled. The tissue trail had come from his own body. His ice axe was tucked under his hip holster, covered in blood. They could never be entirely sure as of what truly did happen, but KD's best theory was this. The climber had been ascending when he struck a loose patch and fell. On the way down, or possibly upon landing, the axe impaled him, disemboweling him. He had dragged himself along, tearing himself apart in the process, before finally dying under the cliff face. Katie isn't squeamish, but several of the guys who helped recover this body vomited when they turned him over and his intestines spilled out. The Vanishing Brothers. I asked Katie if she had a story about people completely vanishing. Her eyes lit up and she leaned in closely. Want to hear a real doozy? When she first started, there was a case that got a lot of media attention. A family had been berry picking near the park entrance. They had 2 boys, both under 5. At some point, one boy vanished. A massive search turned up nothing. Dogs didn't pick up any type of scent, and there wasn't a single trace of him. It was like he was never even there. The search lasted for 2 months before being called off. 6 months later, the family returned to the place with flowers at a memorial spot. They brought their other son. While placing flowers, they lost sight of him for 3 seconds, and he vanished, just like his brother. Another massive search began, the largest in the state history. Over 300 volunteers combed the park, but again, no trace. 2 weeks later, a volunteer nearly 15 miles from the designated search area radioed in. He'd found the boy, alive. When Katie's team arrived, they were stunned. The boy was clean, uninjured, and not even traumatized. The volunteer said that he'd been sitting on a log, playing with a bundle of twigs tied with a little rope. When asked where he'd been and who was he with, the boy just said plainly, "The fuzzy man." Katie, who firmly believes in Bigfoot, asked if he meant Harry. "No," he said, "not Harry, fuzzy." He described a man as blurry, like when you close your eyes, but not all the way. The boy said the fuzzy man came out of the trees, tucked him deep into the woods, and kept him in a hollow tree, feeding him berries. When asked if he was scared, the boy replied, "No, he wasn't scary, but I didn't like how he didn't have eyes." The fuzzy man would yell loudly, without a mouth, whenever the boy wandered too far. When the boy was frightened at night, the fuzzy man made it go brighter, and gave him a twig bundle to play with. Finally, the fuzzy man released him, saying he wasn't the right kind. The older brother was never found. The surviving boy never elaborated further. I apologize for the short update, guys. Things have gotten a little crazy around here, and I'm not sure how often I'll be able to update going further. I really appreciate all of the support you've given me, and while I only have a couple of stories to share this time, I'm curious to hear what you guys all think. A firefighter who was helping us during the training op told me about one call that he'd been on, supposedly to rescue a kid stuck in a massive tree. He said they didn't give him any details, just that they needed to go help him because they didn't have the proper equipment. They'd called him specifically because the tree was so huge the SAR team didn't feel very safe climbing it. Before joining the VFD, he'd worked as a tree trimmer. so it was easy for him to grab his old gear and head out. They led him about 2 miles into the woods before stopping at one of the biggest trees in the area. When he saw it, he laughed and asked the op captain how the kid even managed to get up there, even making a joke about the old cat stuck in a tree cliche. The captain didn't laugh. He just shook his head and told him to get up there and bring the kid down. He said that when he first felt something was off, he didn't press the issue. As he climbed, he started to wonder if they were pulling some kind of prank. Quote unquote. There was no way this kid should have even been able to climb this fucking thing, he told me. It was a very massive base, and about halfway up, it tapered off so sharply I almost turned back a few times. I really didn't think it was going to hold me. But he kept going. Near the top, he saw a flash of blue between the branches. Quote unquote. I saw a kid's shirt caught on a branch, so I called out to him and told him to come towards me, if he could. But he didn't say anything. I kept moving, calling his name, telling him not to be scared, that I was there to help. By the time I reached him, I knew he wasn't going to answer. What he found wasn't just a dead body. It was something far worse. The boy's remains were cradled in a fork-like branch, and by the sheer luck, his body hadn't come crashing down. But he was long dead before ending up in that tree. Quote unquote. I don't know who put him there, or how, or why, the firefighter said, his voice dropping. But it was fucking sick. He went silent for a moment before continuing. Quote unquote. I think I went into shock. I just pushed him down with a stick. I broke off of a branch. I couldn't bring myself to even touch him. I almost lost my job over that. But the thought of hauling that kid over my shoulder, trying to coil his guts around me like rope, I couldn't do it. He climbed down and confronted the captain furiously. Quote unquote. I asked him why the hell he'd send me out there when he knew damn well that kid was dead. He said. The captain just told him that it wasn't any of his concern, and thanked him for getting all the evidence down. That word stuck with him. Evidence. It was like the boy wasn't even a person, like he'd never been a child who got lost and suffered something unspeakable. The captain sent a crew to lead him back out of the woods, but staying behind with 2 others. That felt wrong. Why wouldn't they have just let him help bring the kid out? When he asked, they told him that they couldn't discuss an open case. I asked the firefighter what he thought was happening to the boy. He frowned, deep in thought. Quote unquote. I would have said a crush injury based on how he looked. But with crush injuries, you see massive contusion and obvious trauma. That wasn't like it. It was almost like the kid had got caught in a giant vacuum and had just sucked it out. There was no trauma, not at all. He paused. It bothers me, man. It bothers the hell out of me. One of the vets at a trained op recognized my story from No Sleep. He and I swapped stories before, so he knows me pretty well. He asked if I could share some thoughts he'd been having about the stairs. I'm really glad you decided to share these, he said. It's important that people know what's out there, especially since the Forest Service is doing such a good job covering it all up. When I asked what he meant, he gave me a look like I was crazy. What do you mean, what do I mean? He said. There's no media coverage, no reports about the missing kids or the bodies turning up miles from where they were last seen. David Paulides nailed it. The FS will do whatever it takes to keep people coming here even if it isn't safe. To be fair, this stuff doesn't happen every day, but when you add up the numbers, it's worth looking into, especially the stairs. Then he said something that threw me off. "I'm surprised you didn't mention the flipped ones." I had no idea what he was talking about, and I told him so. He looked shocked. "Dude, I can't believe you've been on this long without seeing them. Nobody told you about them?" When I shook my head, he explained. "There's the normal stairs, the ones we all know about. But sometimes I've come across the ones that are upside down, like a dollhouse staircase flipped over. Top step buried into the dirt, sticking out of the ground, like some weird sculpture. I don't see them often, but they do creep me out more than the regular ones. They remind me of a tornado-damaged place. You know, when the house gets ripped apart and random things are left standing like a lone chimney. These, you can't write off easily. I don't scare easily, but the thought of those flipped stairs has stuck with me ever since. I plan to look into them more." He also got excited when I mentioned the man with no face. "I've seen something like that," he told me. A few years back, he was apparently training in exercise and heard someone walking around outside his tent. Assuming it was another rookie who'd wandered off to pee and gotten lost, he wanted to investigate. He followed the sound for about a mile before spotting another figure near a river, illuminated by the moonlight reflecting off the water. The man had a pack and appeared to be facing him. He called out, asking if he was okay, but the man just cocked his head, like he didn't understand. Then things got weird. As my buddy moved closer, he noticed the man's breathing. It was too slow, too deep, like he was pretending to breathe. His shoulders and chest moved in the exaggerated motions that didn't seem natural. When my buddy shined his light higher, he froze. The man had no face, just smooth, pale skin. Quote unquote. 1 second, he was standing by the river, my friend said, pale as he told the story. Quote unquote. And the next, he was 5 feet away from me. I never looked away. It was like my brain just couldn't process how fast he moved. He fell backwards into shock. And as he scrambled away, a line opened up across the man's throat, stretching to his ears. The figure tilted his head back and smiled, with its throat. No blood, just a gaping black void. My buddy ran as fast as he could back to his camp, feeling the thing right behind him, even though he never actually saw it following. When he got to the fire, the terror ebbed slightly, like being near other people broke the spell. Eventually, he convinced himself that it had just been a dream, but even now, he's not sure. We were telling ghost stories one night, mostly to mess with the rookies, when one woman told us a story that actually got under our skin. She swears that it's true. When she was a kid, she and her friend used to explore the woods behind her house in northern Maine. The forests there were incredibly dense, dark enough in places to block out the sun entirely. There was an unspoken rule among the locals: never go more than a mile or two past the edge of the community. No one said why. Everyone just knew. One summer, a series of massive storms hit. Lightning sparked a fire in the forest a few miles out. The crew put it out, but when they came back, they weren't the same. Quote unquote. It was like they'd been to war, she said. They didn't smile, didn't talk, just left town, like Walking Dead people. When the area was declared safe again, she and her friend decided to hike out there into the burned sections, disobeying their parents. 2 miles in, they found deer skeletons under a tree. Her friend wanted to bury it, but something about its twisted antlers terrified her, so she dragged her friend away. The deeper they went, the more devastated the landscape became. Black, scorched, lifeless. Then they heard shouting. At first she thought that it was her dad, ready to scold her for sneaking out. But as they hid, the voice grew clearer, a desperate cry for help. A man stumbled into view, running towards them. His face wasn't right. His nose, lips, and part of his forehead were gone, like they'd been cleanly sliced off. His knees were bloody and soaked. When he grabbed her shoulder, she felt an electric jolt, and he staggered back, babbling. The only thing she understood was when he screamed, "Don't touch me! You'll make me go back there!" Then he bolted into the woods, screaming the entire time. She and her friend ran home without speaking. They never played in the woods again. They never even talked about the man. I'll update as soon as I can. Thank you all for your continued support. Hey guys, I know you guys have been wanting some stories like this. They're more of the true side, and as you can tell, they are a little bit darker. But you guys have been wanting true and stuff like this, so I wanted to make sure to give you guys something good. So if you enjoyed this, and I know that a lot of people probably have heard this series of stories before, I really wanted to do it because these are probably my favorite search and rescue. So, they're raw, they're dark, they're deep, but hopefully you guys liked it. Thanks for watching. If this is your first video of you watching, I might be sorry. I don't know. I don't know how you guys are about that. But make sure to like, comment, and if you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll subscribe. But make sure to check out the links in the description as well, Twitter, Instagram, yada yada, you know. But with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one.